This show is sponsored by shopveteran.ca and the Canadian Legacy Project. Are you a veteran who owns a business? If so, register your business for free on shopveteran.ca, or if you would like to support veteran-owned businesses, be sure to make shopveteran.ca your first-stop shop. Thanks, everybody. Hello, all you beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me for another special edition of Operation Tango Romeo, the Trauma Recovery Podcast, for veterans, first responders, and their families. As you know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, we don't play the Trauma Olympics here. And trauma is trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter how you got it. I just care, are you hurt? Do you have a trauma injury, and are you suffering the side effects of that? So you don't have to be in uniformed services in order to have post-traumatic stress injury or to be suffering any of the downstream effects, including addiction. So today on the show, I have somebody to talk about her particular path for healing, because it is my strong belief that the system doesn't work very well. It's not very efficient at all, and I think the numbers bear that out. At the OSI clinic, their success rate, whatever they call success, is between 12 and 16%. Not great. And I've had numerous guests on the show, including my dear friend Theo Fleury, who talks about all the different rehab centers out there with incredibly low efficacy rates. People come in, they go out, maybe they're great for a month or two, but they relapse. And relapse happens a lot. I have my own theories on why that is, but I'm very much looking forward to talking with Peggy Shaughnessy today. Peggy, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So let's talk about something we were chatting off air a little bit, and let's just jump right into it. Why are so many First Nations men in jail?
Well, a lot has to do with colonization and the colonial policies that continue. And you and I could speak for the whole 50 minutes on that. But I think one of the biggest reasons is, just like you just said, about trauma and inefficient services that we currently have, is people are looking at the story and not the underlying issues or the impacts from all of the events that happen in one's life. And people are so caught up on the story that they forget about what happened as a result of that story, and that's the impact. So when we deal with people, and especially my specialty has been working with Indigenous men in federal prisons, is trying to figure out how those events have impacted their lives and how do they move forward, and what tools are needed for them to continue in a better way.
So what's the biggest challenge when you're talking with somebody who's in the clink? And what I've found is that until somebody hits rock bottom, and often not even then, do they have the self-awareness of, oh, that's me. That was my actions and my choices. And until they get to that point, they don't have the ability to take power over their situation, because they're blaming and pointing fingers and saying, well, this person did it to me, or this system did it to me, as opposed to, well, yes, that's true, and it's my responsibility to heal myself and to figure this out and to not commit these crimes anymore, or to rebuild myself. What have you found is the biggest barriers when you're dealing with people?
Well, I think there's a lot of points on that one. The very first one is as a worker or somebody that was there to help these men. Once you read their files, sometimes you have to step back and wonder how you could even work with them in the first place, and to figure out how could somebody do those things in the first place. So the first point was to get over and step back and figure out, why they do that in the first place before you can even work with them. But when I started developing the RedPath program, it was as a result of an elder in the prison saying, we have 4 rooms, we have our physical, we have our emotional, we have our psychological, we have our spiritual. And unless we visit each and every one of them every day, we'll never be in harmony. And I heard this story over and over again, and it hit me finally that most people can't even open the doors to those rooms to even figure out what's in them. And so stepping back and looking at that through that story, through that lens, I realized that, you're right. The first thing you have to do is to be able to identify and then define in order to adapt and manage. Because those traumas or those events in your life that occurred aren't going away, they're part of you. And so you have to learn how to adapt and manage them when they come up. The worst thing you could tell someone is to get over it,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so you have to learn first to identify that it was that event, not my partner. So I'm not going to get angry at my partner now because it wasn't my partner at all when those feelings came up, right? And so to be able to first, and there could be so many events. We have a video. I can send you a link after on it, and it's a whiteboard video, and it talks about those things, and so it puts what I'm trying to say a little bit better. But most often you're so overwhelmed because it's not just one thing that has happened. It's something that keeps adding and adding and adding, and you don't even know what that bottom thing is. So it's like peeling that onion. So when we take people through our 20 session process, and often they'll have to go through 3 or 4 times because they're just starting at the top and they're working their way through. My programs have nothing to do with addiction. They can tell me all about addiction, right? My programs getting to the understanding of the why they use or why that behavior in the first place. So like for instance, anger management, what a joke that is. Everybody can tell you their anger, but nobody can tell you why they're jealous. And more people get killed because they're jealous more than they're angry, right? And so emotion management or emotion regulation is so important.
Let's pause there for a second. I want
Okay.
to digest that. More people die because they're jealous than because they're angry. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, if you look at homicidal reports anywhere in our country, it's usually a spouse killing another spouse, usually because they're going to split up and they don't want somebody else to have them. And it's
Mm.
usually over one has been maybe not as loyal as the other. And so if you look at homicidal reports within the country, it's usually over jealousy, right?
That's that's interesting. And when I see undeveloped people that don't have a lot of confidence, that don't have a sense of agency themselves, that don't feel like they've really done anything in their lives, they have two choices. They can look up to those that have done more than them, but more often than not, I find that they look down on them. Like it's a type of narcissism where they create a delusional story of themselves where they're not a loser. they're these super duper people that could do all these wonderful things, and they are constantly criticizing others. I have a couple of family members popping to mind when I describe this. And it, it's really a broken person who can't accept that others are outperforming them. And it's that jealousy, and it's destructive. They lash
And
out at
in
people.
And so I would be very cautious of words such as narcissistic because then it gives somebody a label to live to. I have some really hard problems with psychology's terminology that labels people something that they perhaps may not be. And so then they start becoming something. And often I think people that use the word narcissistic in relationships are probably the narcissistic person themselves. And so I'm just going to challenge you on that word because I really feel that we have to be cautious using words like the very people that you said are giving out pills are the ones that created those words.
Well, that's interesting too. That is probably a place to pause because I've been wanting to have some experts on the show for a while to discuss narcissism because it's been like the latest buzzword, and everybody's a narcissist now. And it seems to me like that word is that diagnosis is being overused a lot. Because I think that there must be a spectrum there, and there must be a line somewhere between somebody who's obsessed and somebody who's narcissistic. And then they talk about 5 different types of narcissism, malignant and whatnot. And I think, geez, this seems like it might be overdiagnosed. And yet on the macro, I see societal wide, sort of a societal narcissism from from my perspective anyway, where people are not willing to listen to others, that their way is the only way. Anybody that doesn't support their worldview is attacked. To me, that's a narcissistic tendency, but not a diagnosis of narcissism. What do you think?
Well, I think it might fall right beside personality disorder. And I
Mm,
would, and it's beyond this show, maybe it's next week's show, you and I.
sure.
And it's like, first of all, what the hell does that even mean? And second of all, why the hell are we even wasting our time on it? Like, if somebody has all of those things that you just said, my next question would be why? And try to come to the understanding on why aren't they listening? Why aren't they doing all of this? Rather than putting them under a label and allowing them to continue to be that way. So if we're trying to heal our community, we need to work with everyone and not just push somebody aside and they're a narcissist. I don't want to have anything to do with them. They're not listening to me. They're doing anything else. But we don't have any understanding why they're doing that in the first place, right? We don't know that. So we're just going to look at them, and it's like my biggest, I have these pet peeves, and we'll probably find out a few more of them before this show's out. But in people in my program, like we'll say they've been pegged because my name's Peggy. So they've been pegged because I've challenged them. Like, my gift was always how many lifers can I make cry when I was in federal prison. So talk about narcissist. But um, I think we have to be very cautious on the terminologies that we use, because often, like for instance, I could have somebody that comes to me that's been diagnosed as depressed. Well, what does depressed mean? If you tell me you're depressed, you have told me nothing. You've only told me the state that you're in. Nothing about it I can help you with, because I don't know why you got depressed, what the background is, where it came from, and all of those steps to get to your diagnoses that somebody said to you, you're diagnosed, and now for the rest of your life, you're going to be depressed. Instead of me sitting you down, you tell me the state you're in, you're depressed, or you're angry, whatever it is, and it's up to me that you're in front of me, that I'm going to go through your life and try to find out on what point did you start having those feelings. Now, I'm not saying there isn't clinical depression and that you go through that. I have degrees in psychology. But why should you be depressed your whole life if you became depressed for some reason? You didn't just wake up this morning and say, oh, clinical depressed, right? So that's why I'm challenging you on narcissistic, because it's a label that I'm an angry wife that's going to call you, my ex-husband that's an asshole, a narcissist. It gives me some power to say that's what you are.
The power of those labels is something too. And I was just looking, and I don't know if it's true, but the story was that there was a study where a bunch of completely normally sane people were admitted to a mental hospital, and to see what happens when 40 sane people get admitted to a mental hospital. And all of the staff start coming up with diagnoses for all 40 of them, 40 out of 40. They all have schizophrenia and whatever label that they throw at them. And they were convinced of that until, surprise, you've been had. And then later on, they say, okay, well, you're not going to get us again. So they figured that there was still people in there. Oh, we found all the fakers. It's like, no, we didn't send any more people. So either way that they did it, diagnosis was a real problem. And I see that in the world of trauma for sure, because there's so many things that line up, and it all boils down to brain injury, like whether it's ADHD, methylquin poisoning, concussion, TBI, CTE. When you line up the all the different symptoms, it looks the same. I mean, there's so much crossover. I don't think that there's a diagnostician out there who's smart enough to sort that out, to sift through it, and to be accurate even half the time. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to first of all go back on the history of the DSM and where it came from. It came from the United States that need a number to build to. And
Mm,
so the DSM continues to change. Why does it continue to change? it needs more codes in order to build to. So first of all, we have to, and I'm not saying there's anything against the DSM, but we have to remember where it came from. And so I don't work in that area. I work in a holistic wellness. Um, I believe in getting to underlying issues, just like PTSD. I'm not saying it'll ever go away, but if you're in the army and you see your comrade go down and you watch that and it's horrific, there's going to be impacts of that for the rest of your life, and it's those impacts that need to be healed. That vision in your eyes, like I used to work in Emerge, I've seen young children being cut out of trees, coming in by ambulance with the rope still around their neck, and having to work on them for quite lengthy time, and the doctor saying no more, and we say no, we want to keep going, right? But they'd say no more. And so, 20 years later, is that vision still in my mind? For sure. Is it as strong as it was so long? But it's looking at the impacts, what it's doing to my life, right? That I have to learn to manage. I can never remove that in my mind, never. But I can identify that it's there. I can, and the awareness comes along so that I can learn over time to adapt and manage it. In that the effects aren't as strong because I'm so aware of it. But I know in my heart that it's never going to go away. A, I saw it, and B, it had an impact on me very strong. I had children at home, all of those things, right? They're not going to go away, but I can work on them so I can manage them, right?
You can't turn down the volume. Like I agree, Peggy, that there is no silver bullet. I've had so many people on the show claiming their silver bullet. Oh, you just do this one thing and you're good for life. I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it works. Uh, let's see if we can unpack a little bit the substance versus the actual problem. Because we've talked about causation, and people are focused. Most clinicians are focused when it comes to addiction on the substance. Well, you just got to get you off the substance. It's 2 weeks to get off of nicotine. It's 3 days to get off alcohol, or whatever the numbers are. And then you're no longer chemically addicted. Well, so what? You have to, from my view, and please correct me if you disagree. Um, if you rebuild the person, then there's no need to go to that substance. And that's what you have to do. Anybody that I've helped quite a few people get sober off of drugs and alcohol without any finger wagging or lecturing. It's just listening, understanding, and then giving them a different path. And it seems to, from my very limited experience, a combination of self-awareness, situational awareness, understanding the impact that something has on their life, and then understanding why. Like, why are you medicating yourself? And I think a big chunk of the stigma is that right there. People don't understand, like Gabor Mate does, that if somebody is an alcoholic, it's because alcohol works. If they are on crack or meth, or it doesn't matter what the substance is, it's because that stuff works. It works, but what's it working for? What is it relieving you of? And the thing that it's relieving you of is the thing that needs to be addressed. When that thing is addressed, you no longer need the substance. What are your thoughts on my ramblings?
Well, so there's, I believe, two reasons people are become addicted: one to feel again, and one to numb the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I used to run drugs for the Satan's Choice in my teenager years. I lost my parents when I was 9. I was raised by my grandparents, so I know the back alleys of the street. And one of the biggest things for somebody that's a user, and thank goodness I never was a user, I didn't want to be found dead in a ditch somewhere. One thing about a user is it's not just getting off whatever they're doing, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's cutting, whatever the behavior may be. It's the game. It's getting out of the game. I can be clean, then I get bored, and then all my friends are over there. This is what I've done. I have a guy that comes here, he's 57. He was in front of the courts with an ounce of fentanyl, an ounce of coke. I go in front of the courts with the Indigenous Peoples Courts, and I convinced the judge with a 22-page report that prison wasn't going to be the way, 7 years. And I was able to keep him out on house arrest. And he doesn't use fentanyl and drugs anymore. He doesn't move drugs. I will now hire him to go out into the community to bring people that he sold drugs to back. And he will even admit that it's a game. It's a game that you have to change. And how do you change something when you've done that for so many years? You've left your house, you go to your dealer's house, you hang around at the fence with all the other drug addicts that are your buddies, until they send you to jail. But often it's a game. So we can get people through. But what we've learned on the most successes is those that continue coming and build community. So the biggest successes that we've seen is those that continue coming for, we have native drumming on Thursdays, we have journaling, we have all of these other things, financial, like learning how to deal with your finances. Because often what happens is people think that as soon as they start feeling better, they need to get a job and get to work. But as soon as they get the money, then they think, I worked hard, I deserve it.
Give myself a little treat.
Yeah, or just like the people that are going off to treatment, and these treatment centers are still using that same old dinosaur techniques of 12-step, and that, nothing against that, of 12-step, but they're still using the same model from 1939, and say maybe through the odd extra little thing in, but they're still concentrating on the addiction. And so what happens then is that's all they're hearing is the addiction and about the drugs. And then they have that pill in their top drawer for their celebration when they get home from treatment, right? And so then it becomes, and you're told in treatment, and there's another sort of a buzzword that I'm just going to warn you about, is that relapse. Mm-hmm. People come here and they'll say, oh, I relapsed. I fell off the wagon. And one of my staff said, no, you didn't fall off the wagon. You effing jumped off of the wagon, right? You didn't fall off. You jumped off. You made a choice. You decided that you were going to drink. Like, don't give me an excuse. So I don't know if I've answered what you've asked me, and you might have to ask me it again. But, I think that it isn't as easy as I'm going to be clean and I'm going to leave here. It's like going to a convention of motivation, and everybody's just rah, 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 and you're just so excited. And then you go home and there's no rah, rah anymore, and you're all by yourself. The motivation's gone almost now because there is not that noise in that group of people. And so that happens in treatment too. You could fall in love there, or, you can meet a best friend until your best friend, you find out, is overdosed in a hotel room down the road after he got out.
Environment's such a big thing, and it seems to me, if I'm hearing you correctly, that you are providing a healthy environment. You're just providing a healthy alternative and community. A post-traumatic stress injury I've often described as a injury of disconnection. It disconnects you from yourself, from who you want to be, who you used to be, and from family. It disconnects you from reality in some cases. So if I'm correct, and it's a injury of disconnection, disconnects from self-awareness and situational awareness, then connection is the antidote. If disconnection is the malady, then connection is the antidote. For me, it's arm wrestling clubs, but it's any community, any healthy community that gives you peers and an environment where you're like, well, this isn't the type of unhealthy, there's healthy behavior here. In the other group I was in, is nothing but destructive. It's constructive or destructive. So choosing a constructive environment and making new friends and letting go of the old friends that are destructive, it's such a big piece of it. At least it has been for me. How important is that overall when people are trying to turn their lives around?
Well, for some people, it's even difficult to do that because, their whole family might have addiction. And mm-hmm. So how do you disconnect from your family? And some have to. I mean, it's really, really hard. Our city is in really rough shape. I'm sure most cities are in the country. And I will argue that most are in the country because the only thing you can get is a pipe or a needle, and it's okay to, they've normalized addictions in our country right now, which is very difficult. Where we might have somebody that was in a tent, we got out of a tent, we got them a place to stay, they've come for our services, and then all of a sudden, an agency will deliver them a pipe or a needle right to their door. And so then, months and months of, doing well, and then an organization decides, oh, you need a pipe, here's one, right? And so, um, the way the system is right now, the most vulnerable are being, I would say, what we're doing in society right now is so unethical because the most vulnerable are being used, similar to that coding in the DSM.
Right out of the Lord's Prayer, lead me not into temptation, and yet these programs are leading them into temptation.
Yeah.
That sounds straight up evil.
Yeah. And so, that is, to build new communities. Right now, I'm just trying to figure that out on how do we go outside our city? Do we get land outside and do we start creating something that way? I'm not sure, but because we've been so successful, um, it's almost like we're moving away from agencies rather than away from the addict themselves, right? That you don't need to hang around with Joe anymore to get a piece of crack. You can get it from somewhere else that's getting paid by the government to run their organization.
What are the pros
Right?
and cons of harm reduction sites from your perspective?
Well, I think that if it's like I was a nurse for 20 years, I worked in Emerge, and I worked in the operating room after that. Um, People don't think I like harm reduction. I think that if it's to get Joe from A to B, so in B we can start working with Joe on how to get them to C. Like we have to stop discussing recovery. We have to start changing the subject to wellness. How do I get Joe from A to B into recovery, but then into wellness? It
What's the
shouldn't
difference?
stop
How
at
do you define that?
recovery. Well, I define it as you're functioning in society, that you feel well, you have a sense of belonging, that that you want to help somebody else now too, right? Um, that's wellness. A lot of frontline workers aren't in wellness, and so when you ask me what I think about harm reduction, it worries me because none of us have been trained to always be on our toes to revive somebody. And so frontline workers are carrying kits just in case somebody besides them go down. And so what happens when they don't um, save them? Like we're gonna see a whole new form of PTSD on frontline workers. You're seeing an increase of suicide on frontline workers. We were not born to just always be on our toes so we can save somebody's life. We weren't. And so that part with harm reduction worries me the most is the frontline workers, and nobody's really looking at that.
Well, it's true. When you're dialed up to 10 all the time, the throttle
Yeah.
gets stuck on full, and there you go. That's a post traumatic stress injury. It's an actual
Yeah.
neurological injury. And it could be drip, 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 like it is with most frontline workers, or in a war zone, like what I was in. It's all at once. But,
Mhm.
and then it's on top of one of the things I teach, and when I do speaking gigs and whatnot, I talk about the people that choose a trauma-rich environment as a career. There's been a lot of good data on that, and overall, people that choose a trauma-rich environment had a trauma-rich childhood. They have high ACEs scores, and it's the same with nurses and people that choose to work in the emergency room for that extra bit of action. Um, uh, when you look at them and you look at their ACEs scores, which is childhood trauma score for those that don't know, it tends to be quite high. Why do you have an idea about why that is?
Well, I think, like, I think psychiatrists, why do people go into psychiatry? They probably go into psychiatry to try to figure their own self out. And
Often.
so I think that that's with anything. I couldn't save them, so maybe I can save someone else, right? Like, I can't save myself, but maybe I can save someone else. I think that if you look in nursing, because I was a nurse, a lot of them married asshole husbands too. And I think that they thought that they could tell me your wife isn't a nurse. But, so I think that, you know, they were going to save their husbands too. So it's interesting, all around, why we choose what we do. Like, people ask me, why do you choose what you do here? And I'm 67 years old next week, and I should be at my cottage knitting or on my potteries wheel throwing pottery. But I love it. This to me isn't a job. This is a passion, right? And
Mm.
I grew up. My uncle was a wino under a bridge downtown. My mother was a prostitute. My mother ran off. My father died at 39. That this has been my whole life. This is almost normal, right? Um, and so by helping other people, I feel content in my own life. I've done a lot of healing throughout my life, and so I've been very fortunate to be able to get to a state of contentment where I don't help people, I just give them tools. And I always say to people, you bring the tool belt and I'll bring the tools, and then it's up to you what tools you think you need, right?
You're touching on something that's super important. I also talk about on the show quite often, which is purpose. I've often heard people say, "Well, we just got to get somebody a job to give them a sense of purpose." I'm like, you. There's a lot of jobs out there that do not provide purpose. They provide you something to do, I suppose, but purpose is a very, very powerful thing to have in your life. And when you have purpose, it is one of the greatest things to not be an addict. It is a great antidote for it. It's a big piece of the puzzle is having purpose. Because when you have purpose, it means that you are responsible for somebody else. It's one of the reasons that I'm sober, because the work I do with this show, I'm responsible for everybody that listens to it. So I stay sober, and I'm in it was 6 years in April. Um, I'm responsible for others. Therefore, I must be responsible myself. And that sense of purpose is just out of contribution to community, helping people, thinking about more than just entertaining myself. You can't have a sense of purpose just by entertaining yourself through recreational activities. You have to help somebody to have true purpose, meaningful purpose. And when you're helping somebody, you can be 67 and still working and happy to do it because
Mm-hmm.
that, of course, you're passionate about it. You help people. You're actually lifting the lives of others. And that's not something that wears off. It's a powerful tonic. And it's why I keep doing what I do, even though it's a lot of bloody work and I do it for free.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you say that. Years and years ago, Archie Chichu, who was an elder in Moose Factory, he said to me, when you meet the creator's going to ask you two things: who are you, and what have you done in your life, and what are the tools that I get? How did you use the tools that I gave you? And I think, oh well, I'm a a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm all these, until it really hit me that the creator already knows my life. He already knows what I've went through in my life, but do I? And what got stuck along the way during my life that I may not be able to tell the creator that already knows. And so that sort of took me through that journey on how do I get clients to get those things in their life unstuck that they don't even know is stuck, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And and those are the things, those teachings I've received along my journey in the last 20 some years, is those discussions with those elders and trying to figure out what they meant. But I think the greatest gift in life is when you know why you were born and what your purpose is in this life. And I know that this is the reason why I was sent here. And I know that this is my purpose, is to help people get ready for when they meet the creator. And I'm not religious, or none of the I don't have there's no religious part within any of my work. I'm very spiritual. But I believe that I know my purpose is that tool provider, and to allow people to be given those tools so that they can be prepared when they meet the creator, and they'll know what their life story was.
I think one of the things that hang people up is if the obstacle seems too big, they don't even start. So there's so many people who don't know why they're here. They don't have that sense of purpose. And what I would suggest to them, if you're frustrated because you don't know what your thing is yet, just be kind and have
Mm-hmm.
that as your purpose. If you can smile at one person a day and watch them return that smile to you, oh my God, you're a wonderful person. And anybody can do that. My wife comments when we're out, we're at a restaurant or even going through a drive-through window. I always ask somebody's name. If they don't have a name tag on, I ask, and what's your name? It's just a matter of recognizing I see you as a human being and you matter. And it's so simple, and it can seem like it's so small, but you can make somebody's entire day just by saying their name, by saying a warm thank you, by acknowledging their existence, by smiling at them and watching them smile back. So you don't have to have your own podcast. You don't have to have a giant recovery center. Like, you don't have to do all those things to have purpose and to matter. You can do something simple like making other people, one person a day, try to make somebody smile by smiling at them and just being kind. It's really that easy.
And one of the big difficulties listening to their um, about the kindness, do we people talk about we have a lot of homelessness right now, and I think a lot of it is a lot of landlords don't want to rent to someone because of how to get them evicted when it becomes a trap house, and those types of things, right? So you know people rent and then they don't get their rent, and then all of a sudden you got to line up, people are getting drugs, and then you can't get them out and you have to go to a tribunal. And so I have a fellow right now that's doing really well, and somebody I know, I took him to see an apartment, and then the neighbors saw him coming out, and then next thing I get a call, oh, we can't rent to him, right? And I started to cry, and I said, I hope some of those neighbors never have children that have to come and see me. And so yesterday I was able to get him an apartment that he's moving in tomorrow too. But those are other hurdles because of what's happening, and with tenant landlord acts and all of those things that aren't really in favor of the landlord. Often that's why people can't have housing, is because of there's a lot of people that have created a problem across the country that way as well. So that is another hurdle for somebody trying to get clean.
I'm not even sure I can understand what a solution for that might be.
Yeah.
I've been a landlord. I've owned rental properties, and I've never had a ton of money. So if somebody stops paying the rent,
Mhm.
carrying my own home that I live in, plus carrying another home that somebody else is in,
Yeah.
like, it's most people can't do that. They can't carry an extra mortgage for more than a month or two. Uh, you'll go bankrupt. So landlords obviously have to protect themselves.
Yeah.
We're not a bunch of Scrooge McDucks out there.
Yeah. So what we do is we our organization rents the apartment. We make the client sign a thing with us that these are the rules, and if they don't follow them, and they sign it, that, and it's only for 11 months, so it falls below the Landlord Tenants Act, so that you can re-sign another one for another 11 months if they've done well. And so then it's just between us and the landlord, and that if that person doesn't do like what we've set forth, then they have to leave.
I think the Veterans Association does that as well. I was
Yeah.
recently voted on the board. It's a beautiful organization. and I think a really good model for support organizations of any kind. But
Right.
they meet you where you're at, and yeah, they will take care of the rent for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty tough to have any kind of recovery if you don't even have a home. It's a
No.
pretty base thing. If you don't have, if you're living under a tarp, it's hard to feel good about yourself. And isn't that really the base of everything? Is self concept. One of the mantras that I preach is you can only treat yourself how you believe you deserve to be treated. Otherwise said, people only rise to their level of self concept. So if you believe that because of your background or your parents or your last name or your heritage, that that's all you are, and that's your identity, then that's how you act until you realize that you are the choices that you make. And yes, that trauma is there. And yes, it is an obstacle to overcome. And yes, it's not fair. That's all true. And yes, it's difficult. And yes, it hurts. And it's all of our responsibilities to identify that negativity in our life and overcome it. And isn't that the fine line? Like it is always a dance between accountability and personal responsibility without discounting your history. Like the history has to be acknowledged, it has to be respected, and it has to be dealt with, or you're a victim for your whole life.
Well, in Indigenous culture, you learn that you worry about the 7 generations coming behind you.
Mm.
And I was raised by my grandparents who were first generation from Ireland, and I really believe that you also have to look at the 7 generations that came before you, because I think we carry traumas in that from each generation. And especially Ireland, Southern Ireland, you know, couldn't speak your language, you couldn't own land. England took the best of the food, and
That's
you were
and
left with
that's not woo
potatoes.
woo. That's epigenetics. Like
Yeah,
that has been shown.
yeah. And I think that, like, I think Sinead O'Connor in her song Famine, she talks about you have to the remembering, and then you have to grieve, and then you can forgive. And I think that's so important, is the remembering is the first thing. And often when all of these other things are happening in your life, you're under a tarp, you have no food, your family has given up on you, people look at you like you're dirty. Where do you start for the sense of belonging? And sometimes people just need a hug, or know that they can come into a space. Like, anybody can come into our space if they're using, but they're assessed, and they're told right then, you come back when you're ready to change your life. Like, this isn't a place where people can just hang out and take advantage of us. We're not a coffee shop. We're a place for healing. And so there's lots of places around town you can get a needle or whatever you need, but not here. So we sort of are the alternative that no one else is doing. And does everybody come back? No, but a high majority do come back, and then they'll start the program.
So, what do you think the secret sauce is for recovery? Like, what is the red path? What do you do that's different from everybody else?
Liz?
Well,
I think
hello. You've been there
hello.
the whole time.
Yeah, so I'm Peggy's Peggy 2.0. No, I'm her middle child, and I've worked with her for the past 20 years, so I've got to witness the battle. Some days you wonder why she keeps doing it, but I personally think it's more than just a secret sauce. I think it's like meeting the clients where they're at, and like being authentic. We call it how it is here, and I think people really find that refreshing. You can't lie to us; we can see through it. So when you're able to be honest about where you're at, and the frontline workers aren't trying to change you, you're here to change yourself. I think our biggest gift is that we help connect people with their spirit, because one of the biggest things we find in this journey is that so many of us are disconnected from our spirit. And I don't mean that in a religious way, but when we're disconnected from our spirit, that's the biggest part of who we are.
Well,
And
that's
so
what
I
I
think
was saying earlier. Trauma is an injury of disconnection. So, can you unpack what that means to people so they don't think it's woo woo? Because I'm with you, but how
yeah.
do we describe this to people, because I'm still struggling of how, like, I say it out loud, I say it in my head, but I'm not even sure what I mean. I know it's right, but I have been having trouble articulating it. How would you articulate
Well, I
being
think when
separated from
something
spirit?
happens to us, whether we want to call it a traumatic experience or whether life just happens,
Mm,
when those things happen that are so difficult, and it's like that's when we disconnect. That's when a little part of us stops, right? And so I picture that being a time when our spirit gets affected. And so we're walking through life in almost this zombie state because when we're not connected to ourselves and our spirit, how can we be connected to others? And not just other human beings, but how can we be connected to the earth around us? And, the way we care for the world around us is a reflection of how we care for ourselves, right?
hmm
So if you look on our streets right now and it's just littered with garbage and needles and people bent over, that's a reflection of how they're caring for themselves and the world around them.
Well,
So the
like
reason I
hoarders, right? Again, a couple of family members popped to mind. You'll walk into their home and it's a garbage dump, like it's a landfill site, is what they live in, because the world without is a reflection of the world within.
Well, and I always tell the clients as above, so below, right? And
Mm.
so when you're looking at your inner world, the outside world is a reflection. And that video that we'll send you on the whiteboard video, the 4 rooms that we use in our tool, the spiritual room is so important because that's the room where we connect, and that's the room where like whether maybe we don't want to cope, so we use because we want to hide from the world. And in that video, that spiritual room is quite beautiful and quite comfortable. It's an easy place to be. But as life happens and as we stop unpacking those boxes, you'll see in the video that the spiritual room becomes quite overwhelming. And that's a reflection of the world around them, right? And so I always say to clients, we have one client in particular. He goes to see a psychiatrist at the hospital. I don't know how many times. I don't know if it's once a month or what. He's always seeing him, right? And because he's been coming here and he's taken the program 4 times and he no longer wants to kill himself, like that's the reason he found his way here. It wasn't for addiction, but he's now cleaning his house. He's now paying his taxes. He's now doing these everyday mundane things that people are like, oh, wow, everybody has to do that. But a lot of the times when you're so disconnected and you're so overwhelmed, you're not doing the everyday tasks. And he says, well, my psychiatrist doesn't ask me if I smoke weed all day. My psychiatrist doesn't ask me if I do my dishes. My psychiatrist doesn't ask me if I'm playing Xbox all night.
Did you brush your
All of
teeth
these
this
things,
morning?
that's it. All of these things
Sounds
have
like
an
Eagle
effect
story.
on our spirit, right? What's that?
Eagle story.
So my mom's telling me I need to tell you a story because we're
I like
storytellers.
stories. Do it.
And that's how we teach. So we have in the building there's a particular set of paintings that tells the story kind of what we do. So it's called the Eagle Story, and we use storytelling in all of our sessions. It's just a really easy way to connect without having to have a university degree. So we use storytelling to reflect back on our own lives. So this story in particular is the first story in all of our programs, and it's called the Eagle Story. So an eagle is shot and wounded and a farmer finds this eagle inside of a ditch. So the farmer takes the eagle and places the eagle in the chicken coop. And through feeding and through mimicking, the eagle becomes a chicken because often where we're placed is what we become. And so an indigenous man is coming down the road and he says to the farmer, what's an eagle doing in that chicken coop? Because the indigenous man knows who the eagle is and recognizes he doesn't belong there. And the farmer says, well, his wing is mended. He can fly out any time. I guess he just thinks he's a chicken. So the indigenous man says, well, can I take that eagle? And the farmer says, sure, it's one less mouth I have to feed. Because when you're in the system and they're not ever looking to move you beyond that chicken coop, you're simply a number within the system, right? So the indigenous man takes the eagle to the sacred mountain. And this is kind of how we approach healing. And he sits at his level because he is no different than the eagle. And he reminds this eagle who he is and where he comes from, and that he can gain back everything he lost through perseverance and understanding, because the healing journey requires total perseverance. You're not going to unpack 40 years of your life in 1 week. There's no magic pill to fix you, right? And so he takes this eagle to the top of the mountain and he throws him off again and again. And it takes the eagle time to remember who he was. But that indigenous man doesn't pick him up and say, well, I'm not throwing you off again if you don't learn how to fly. Like, this is really frustrating. I keep telling you what should. He goes and he picks him up. And he reminds him again who he is and where he comes from. And eventually the eagle flies. But he doesn't fly and all of a sudden he's saved. He's still a shadow of who he was, because practice is perfect. You have to practice the tools that you've gained in order to get better at them. Practice doesn't make perfect. Every time you practice, it is perfect because you're gaining a deeper understanding. And eventually that eagle soars and he remembers who he is and where he came from. But you have to have someone who's willing to share and to care and to teach. And that's where we come in. We have no judgment because judgment is simply something within myself I need to heal. We're not here to diagnose because, as you know, we're outside the system. We don't agree with labels. And if you use tonight, I'm sleeping at home. I'm still living my life. It doesn't affect me, but it affects you. And so we are here to help people move beyond their story and to step fully back into their lives. And that eagle story, when I tell it, sometimes it brings people to tears because they're like, I'm in the chicken coop and I don't know how to fly out of it. And they don't have somebody who comes along and sees where they really belong.
You treat yourself the way you believe you deserve to be treated. You're not a chicken. I think there's a deeper thing too, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I've thought forever that the destruction of indigenous culture, which has happened all over the world, is on purpose, and it is full and it is complete. And the reason being, and this is my conspiracy theorist hat, but it seems to be true, is that indigenous people are like an icon. They are an example that you don't need the government. Because tribes of 100 to 150 doing their own thing, no government, and they're fine. No infrastructure, and they're fine. So they don't need the system. And if the system wants anything, it wants dependence. It wants you dependent on that system. And I believe that's why indigenous cultures from around the world have been destroyed. It's on purpose because the system does not want that reminder. So they'll do more than just kill, they'll destroy the image. So instead of the image of a First Nations person being connected to the land and this beautiful image, right, which it should be, it's, oh, a drunken Indian. Completely destroy the image, the association, and to create something perverse that is the opposite of what it should be, all to so that the government can be completely and totally in control. And anybody that's not in that system is seemed to be a savage or not civilized or not worth your time. And the way people have been treated, it seems like it's mission accomplished. So that's my theory.
Well, and what I can tell you about that is I'm sitting beside somebody who's about to become a doctor, my mom, who reminds us at 67 years old, you can do whatever you want. And she's driven by her passion and her frustration for the system. And I think if there's anyone who can comment on colonization and the effects that it has on the body, like the impacts it still has today, I'm going to turn the video to this expert over here, which our own community seems to not want to call her an expert, but here she is.
So I'll just read you the title of my dissertation right here that's waiting to be defended. And it's called Echoes of Injustice, Regulating Indigenous Masculinity Through Canadian Legal and Colonial Systems. So it's a regulation. If Indigenous people were looked at seriously, the government, one of the biggest problems is they don't want to live up to treaties. And so they want all Indigenous people in Canada to be Canadian so they could cut the strings off of the money that they still owe them for the stolen land that we're on. And so if you look way back in the history, and I won't take up too much time, is the land was given with the agreement that the government would put so much money aside for that land. And so that money then that was put aside did not go to First Nation communities. It went to give those monies every month back with what they're doing. That was supposed to, with the treaties, be on top of that. So when people in Canada think that Indigenous people are getting all of this, they haven't got what was put aside in the first place for them. So, I mean, it just is this continuous fight, whether it be by lawyers, whether it be by the Supreme Court of Canada. there's always something going on with land rights, with all of those things. So I think that in my life, and probably in your life and my grandchildren's life that are coming behind me, the fight will remain till the end of our all our existences. Um, and you're right. There probably is answers that could get us out of some of these problems. But then, that picture of that drunken Indian, like, you were um, part of the army, and I don't know what part you fought in, but you look at Tommy Douglas. Tommy Douglas was a declarative
Tommy Prince.
yeah, Prince, and you look at his hit story, and died on a park bench as an alcoholic because
I
they
had
tried
his
they
daughter on the show.
enfranchised him. Yeah, they enfranchised him, and he no longer belonged in his community and never got accepted in white society. So such a sad story.
Tommy
But
Prince
it's
is a
just a
horrific
prime
story,
example.
and I've
Yeah,
tried to get movies made about him, and
yeah,
apparently there is one that was in the works, but I don't know if it's across the finish line yet. I actually got to follow up with Karen, but
yeah.
I had his daughter on the show, and it was
Oh wow.
a very, very powerful episode for
Yeah,
sure. Um, it's a name that's, and not the only name. There's several
yeah,
superhero indigenous veterans
yeah,
um, with unbelievable stories. Uh, but Tommy Prince, because that's the one I know the,
yeah.
the most. There's drill halls. I was just in Wainwright, and
Mm.
because my son is in battle school right now. This is his last week
Okay.
of reserve battle school, and there's the Tommy Prince Drill Hall. So this big
Okay.
hollowed sacred building named after Tommy Prince, and
Wow.
statues of the guy. But you're right, he died
Yeah,
hungry and drunk and
yeah,
unhoused on the
yeah,
streets of Winnipeg.
yeah.
An
And then there's
absolute
the
tragedy
the code talkers too, right? Like,
in the States.
uh,
Yes, the
yeah,
Navajo code talkers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, enormous contributions, and at a great cost. Because, like you're
yeah,
saying, Tommy Prince, he had to give up his Indian status
yeah,
in order to serve in the military, but the military didn't treat him as a full-fledged veteran because of his Indian status, which he had to
yeah.
give up. It's this weird. So he just got screwed both ways.
But he got medals from the king, right?
He did.
Yeah,
He was highly decorated, although it's very likely that as highly decorated as he was, because he was First Nations, he only got about half of what he deserved.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but and there's so many others. There's so many
yeah.
others with incredible stories that need to be told. And in Canada, we're just the shits at telling our stories. We're terrible at
And
it.
I think too, what isn't spoken enough of is how men coming home, like from places like Afghanistan that have the highest grade heroin in the world, come home addicts from serving our country, and we're not looking after them properly either.
Well, that's why I do what I do,
Yeah,
because the system sucks. So
yeah,
I try to find people like yourself that it's always these mom and pop up organizations all over the place that do a better job than the system. There's tons of
mhm,
help, but it's fragmented and it's all over the place. So finding it is a real bugger. So this show is
yeah,
the only place that I'm aware of that finds every modality of healing and every resource and every practitioner that I can bring them on the show to say, here's your help. And then people can, who are looking for help, can listen to the episode that speaks to them, meet them where they're at. And if they want to learn about you and what you do, that's why I have you on here. And
mhm,
and hopefully you use this episode to share it because it's a lot of FAQs and use it for people as part of intake. Like, here's what we do, is how we do it. Um, Here, listen to this if you're not too sure. you know, it's all done in the conversation. So to that, if somebody wants to access your program, what would you say to them to encourage them to come into your
oh, that's
program?
funny.
Just show up.
Just show up if they're in locally, um, and
Well, right now we're only local.
Right now we're just local. We're in the process though of trying to open up a facility that we can bring people to. So if people are interested in that, they can get in touch with us, so at least we know what the demand is.
And what's the best way to get a hold of you, Peggy?
Peggy at RedPath.
Peggy at redpath.io, what I gave you.
Peggy at redpath.io. I'll
Yeah.
make sure my producer.
Because that's what we're doing right now, is seeing like the size and the need.
Okay. I'll make sure my producer puts your contact info in the comments
Okay.
when she
That's
produces
perfect.
this episode.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. Is there anything else that you need to say that hasn't been said?
Would you say anything?
Mm-mm.
I think we've covered everything from my words that I don't like. That so the next time you and I meet, you'll know better. And just I think one of the biggest things that I hear that sort of piss me off is, well, everywhere's like that. Like our city's in rough shape right now, and that's what you hear. Everywhere's like that. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Everywhere doesn't need to be like that. And I think that if more and more like-minded people keep coming together, and I applaud you for what you do, that we can make our communities better, and we can help people get back on their feet and have the life that they deserved. So I that's what keeps me moving forward, and I'm sure with you as well, that there is an alternative to what's there. If you've tried it and it hasn't worked, there is other options. And if you're trying and it is working, then keep doing it. I always tell people, just because I believe this doesn't mean you shouldn't. All as I'm saying is, this is what I have seen that works, and I'm hoping that for those that are watching, that you find what you need works for you too.
When a problem is enormous, a lot of people that would do something if they knew what to do nothing, because it's overwhelming. It's just too big. So if it's just too big, they feel like, oh, I can't possibly do any good. I can't help anything anyway, because the problem is just too big. Well, if you can help one person, that is enormous. That is enormous. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Never mind about whether or not you can fix the problem provincially, nationally, or globally. Think about if you can help one person one time. And if you can help one person a year, or one person a month, or one person a week, but just focus on one at a time. And if more people just gave a shit and didn't treat people suffering from addiction or homelessness or any of that as subhuman, but saw them for what they are, which is injured humans that need a space to heal and to rebuild, maybe they wouldn't be shitting on them quite so often, because that's what happens. People get kicked when they're down, especially if somebody's suffering with addiction or homelessness or both. People spit on them and they kick them when they're down instead of lifting them. They push them further down, and just it's brutal, and it's the type of thing that when everybody has their last day, and when you meet your maker, you'll be regretting treating people like that. Yeah, there's no way around it. But Peggy, I'm just thrilled that I saw you on the Ben Mulroney show, and he had me on for a short bit. It's a completely different format, and I thought, geez, I got to reach out to you. So thank you so much for being responsive and for coming on the show to talk to my audience. I really appreciate it.
And thank you. And just remember, it's changing the conversation. It's giving hope, and it's that we can move forward and get our communities healthy again.
Absolutely. Please stay on the line. And thank everybody who's tuned in today. Another important discussion. And as always, share like the sugar bear, because sharing is caring. Like, comment, and subscribe. It really, really helps me out. And you never know, just by supporting this show, by commenting, subscribing, sharing the episode, you might be saving a life. Because every time you support the show, you share the show, you make a comment, you subscribe, you are creating a little beacon of light, or making that beacon a little bit brighter so that somebody might find it. Thanks, everybody. Love you all.